Welcome to Face to Face, and today we're going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about voting right, about immigrant voting right in New York City. I'm with Anna Dioguardi and Dennis Redmond from the Queens Community House, and we're going to talk about a piece of legislation who had just been passed by the New York City Council yesterday, granting the right to vote for legal residents in New York. So welcome to Face, or welcome back, because you were already a guest in the show many years ago. So welcome to Face.
Thank you. Good to be back.
So maybe we can explain briefly what the legislation is all about, and then after that we will do a historical process and maybe how the Queens Committee got involved with that legislation. So who wants to do?
Anna, do you want to talk about the legislation itself?
So the legislation itself that passed yesterday, Intro 1867, grants voting rights or expands voting rights to include documented non-citizens in New York City. And my understanding of the legislation is that that includes anyone who has been a New York City resident for 30 days or more and is a documented immigrant. And it's only for municipal elections. So that means that this new group of voters would only be voting for citywide offices like city council, comptroller, public advocate, mayor, but they would not be eligible to vote for city or federal elected officials.
But it's a good chunk of, I don't know, at some point it was roughly 1/3 of the population, or maybe not that much anymore, but it's a good, it was like 30 to 40% of the population.
Yeah, they've said that yesterday's legislation as passed would expand the right to vote in municipal elections to about 800,000 New Yorkers.
Ah, great. And then, so how did we got to this place? Because it was very surprising, because I know we have been working on this piece of legislation for a decade. And so maybe Dennis, you want to cover, because I know the Queens Committee House got involved very early on the process. So
yeah, I think this was the 5th iteration of this legislation. It's been introduced and reintroduced over several different city council terms with several different sponsors. And the Queens Community House has been involved since 2008. I think that was the sort of the second or perhaps the third sort of formation of this legislation. And I think for us it was a very clear and very simple why we should be involved. We're sort of working, as our name implies, in Queens. We're working a lot with communities that have very high percentage of immigrant residents and very high percentage of undocumented immigrant residents as well. And our focus is about not just providing social services, but really we're looking at the health and the well-being of the community as a whole. And so as a settlement house, sort of democratic values and promoting democracy has been a big part of our model. And we envision it as a big part of a healthy community. When everyone in the community has a voice, when everyone feels engaged, when everyone feels that they're connected and what they say and how they think about things matters, it leads to a healthier, stronger community. So for us, it was a no-brainer to get involved in this legislation.
Yeah, because the people who are going to be able to vote are paying taxes. They are part of the community as anybody else. It's not like they have a free pass to anything. It's and they have children in schools, and they have businesses, and they have work, and they do transportation, but they don't have the right to give their voice to anything happening in their community. So how this gonna translate? Do we have any type of vision of what gonna change for the people who are engage, but also for the rest of the community who are profiting in some ways also from the involvement. Anna?
I mean, I think for elected officials that are running for local office, it definitely may change the way that they speak to voters and speak to issues in their district. I think especially in Queens, there's some districts that are really vast and diverse, and it could be easy for a candidate to focus just on one sector of the community that has a high percentage of voter participation. And I think now they may have to rethink some strategies and recognize that they always should have been representing the entire district, regardless of whether or not everyone could vote. But certainly now with this increase in voters, I think it'll force them to look at the whole district and look at the issues that affect everyone.
That's for sure, because I know to get a meeting with a council member, if you are voting, if you are voting, you're going to get much more listen, and it's going to be a lot of space into the calendar than if you are somebody who is not necessarily voting. So, Dennis, any more to add to that?
I also think it sends an incredible message. It's as we've been saying, these are people who have been living in New York, have been paying taxes, or sending kids to our school. But in a sense, I think there's a perception of them being sort of second-class citizens in the sense of New York citizens, and not necessarily being seen, not necessarily having the sense that what impacts them matters and that people are concerned about it. So if nothing else, this is going to give the message that that as New Yorkers, we see everyone here, all of our neighbors, on sort of that equal level, that regardless of where you're coming from, regardless of whether you've gone through the process of becoming a U.S. citizen, you are a New York City citizen, and your participation matters. So I'm hopeful that it will also translate into people feeling more comfortable just to be involved in their community, in what goes on in the city, and more apt to sort of step forward and be more to participate more, to be more active.
I mean, when the COVID started, when the pandemic started in Queens, it was a disaster, and the structure, and we could see. It became visual, the disparity and the lack of resources in Queens was absolutely amazing. And then the food pantry were to be run, and I know you are running some of them, and the access to the hospital was overwhelmed. And the day workers who are finishing their on the street with no resources, no phone, no work, and nothing to do. So it's true, and it's really be able to vote, transform a community at the big scale.
Yeah, and I think it's again, another opportunity to hopefully people feel more empowered to advocate for those needs. And as you said, we're working in some of the communities that are sort of the most under-resourced, because people don't necessarily feel like they have a right to advocate. So I'm hoping that still will translate into that as well.
So do anybody knows why this happened now? I mean, because we have been working on it for quite some time.
Yeah.
And when I saw President Trump being elected and running after the any type of voting possibility for anybody, I was like, this legislation, it's bye-bye. And then suddenly it came back into life and be passed. So I
think back to 2008. Anna, you can tell me you agree with this, but a lot of the response we got from people was sort of like, democracy works. Why try to fix it? And there was a little bit of that sense of just sort of like, everything's fine. I think what has changed in 12 or 13 years is it's become really apparent that democracy in this country really is at risk. It's really being undermined. And it's also clear that, you can't just maintain the status quo. It's something that needs to continually evolve. So either you're involved in helping to strengthen and expand democracy, or you're going to be involved in helping to contract and restrict democracy. There's no other choice. And I think it's become more apparent to people right now that democracy is something that has to be fought for.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
sorry, go ahead, Anna. Yeah, sorry.
No, just that I think that there were several city council members, to be quite honest, that really did want that realized this was the time to put themselves out there and make that statement that Dennis was just alluding to, that they're willing to kind of state their legacy and put their mark on being a champion for democracy at a time when it's being threatened.
So you think, because at my point of view, it could have been a strategy from the Democratic Party from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, to go in communities and expand the voting right in all the communities, to in some way to be able, one, to access it, to have these communities to get involved in political level, to get their opinion, to get their participation, and to have also strengthening the voting and engagement. So you think it's going to be a strategy of the Democratic Party at the federal level, at the national level? Dennis?
I don't think so. I don't think they see things the way you do, David. But maybe they'll.
I know it's too bad.
It is too bad, but maybe you can spread the show out to them, and they'll get a. I'm not quite sure. I think the fact that New York has passed this legislation certainly is going to have an impact around the country. Hopefully, it will help to support. There are a lot of efforts underway in towns and cities around the country to get this similar kind of legislation. So I think it's going to happen more that way first, rather than, I don't think we're going to be seeing it proposed at the federal level anytime soon. But maybe it can start happening within cities and then maybe even some states, and it's going to go more that route.
I think too, it just, like we've been saying, it just makes a statement, or it's an affirmation for democracy. And so I think it does, if nothing else, lend something to the conversation about broad voter disenfranchisement and kind of the erosion of voting rights at not only a local but a federal level. So while I agree, I don't think that the next step is kind of national expansion of voting rights, I do think that it lends something to that conversation of voter disenfranchisement and where, what kind of democracy we want to be as a country.
Yeah. So I also think, just to say, one of the things with this legislation that we were so clear about is this is not about voting for the president. This is not about voting for, national issues, because this is about voting for issues that really sort of impact people on that kind of local level. And so I think the idea that people, if they want to vote, for national issues like the president or any other kind of federal issues, I think the idea of citizenship still makes sense. And it's still I think we should expedite the process and make it easier for people to do it if they want to do it. But I think that's still the sort of way to go. But I think this also really helps people to start thinking about and talking about understanding democracy on a lot of different levels and a lot of different ways that people can be having input, and that it's not a monolithic thing. Like, democracy is not just about, every November being able to vote. It's really something that is much more of an ongoing process throughout the year. And it hopefully gets people thinking a little bit more about how do we expand democracy in a lot of ways that goes beyond just these sort of annual elections.
Yeah, that's how, for the humanists who got involved, it's through the ideas of direct democracy, and it was one of the example of one of the piece of legislation who could really show then it's much more direct to have people be engaged at the municipal level and to get their stand. So that's how I got involved with the legislation. Mm-hmm. To close on a very interesting note, it's the board of the voting board in New York is such a mess. How are they going to manage that story technically? And I mean, it's going to have to be, a lot of things going to have to be transformed, no? And now you want to...
Yes, the answer. According to the legislation that was passed yesterday, the expansion of voting would start in the 2023 elections. So they have a year to figure it out. And I think my basic understanding is that there would be, a whole separate voting card or ballot specifically for the municipal elections. And yeah, it's up to the Board of Elections to figure out how that happens and how it happens in a clean, smooth, protected way.
And people are going to have to register, like if they were, and then do they affect the political party? Do they have to belong to, and the primary and so on and so forth?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer.
Okay. All right. So anything you want to plug before we wrap it up? Any information you want to share or any?
I'd like to plug my book. No, I'm sorry. No, I just think this is it's a very exciting moment. It was a very exciting thing that happened. And, the three of us have not been active of late very much in this campaign, continuing to support it. But it feels like a wonderful opportunity and something to be celebrated. So I'm happy to be on with two of my colleagues and to be able to celebrate with you this moment.
Yeah, it's true.
And I agree. I think because it has been such a long haul to get to this point, there's been so many individuals that have impacted this campaign and certainly brought me in to the conversation about true democracy. And I think it is a moment to kind of recognize all of those contributions and celebrate as a community.
Yeah, there have been a lot of people over the years who have been involved in helping to push this forward and helping to get it out. So I'm thinking about them all today. Yeah, hopefully they're celebrating wherever they are as well.
Thank you so much for the show. Thank you so much, Anna, Denise, and congratulations again. And then we'll celebrate. That was your show Face to Face. And keep please watching your news on presenza.com and subscribe. And hope to see you very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.